I'm Jianxin. I'm glad to be here to have this opportunity to share our research. In this talk, I'm going to present our work titled Adaptive Multi-Resolution Encoding for Interactive Large-Scale Volume Visualization through Functional Approximation. This is a joint research between University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Argonne National Lab. So functional approximation as a high-order continuous representation provides a more accurate value and gradient query compared to the traditional discrete volume representation. So for scientific data visualization, rendered image directly generated from functional approximation gives rendering result closer to the ground truth without high-order artifact caused by the trilinear interpolations. So however, query a functional approximation model is computationally expensive, especially when the input data is large. Its long rendering time makes the overall input latency impractical for interactive visualization. So in this paper, we propose a functional approximation multi-resolution representation, adaptive FAM, to minimize such input latency while still maintain a comparable rendering quantity. So our solution consists of two parts: a fast query lightweight representation, and a GPU accelerated out-of-core multi-resolution visualization framework. So for related work, so out-of-core algorithm only renders a portion of the entire dataset through dynamic streaming of the content of interest to minimize the memory footprint. However, the data movement needs to be optimized to minimize this I/O latency across memory hierarchy. Second, acceleration of visualization of visualizing large dataset through functional approximation can be actually achieved by parallel computing. However, such high-performance computing resources are not very easily to be accessible to non-professional user. So recently, deep learning-based rendering synthesis is emerging to enhance the performance of generating visualization result. So this is achieved through inferencing a trained implicit neural representation through GPU. However, rendering synthesis needs a long end-to-end modeling time due to the training dataset preparation and the training the implicit neural representation itself. So in this work, we propose adaptive FAM, which is an adaptive functional approximation-based multi-resolution representation. So our work is trying to address the two main challenges here, so which are the encoding time and the rendering time. So our encoding pipeline is efficient end-to-end modeling through in and cross-level encoding to model large-scale volumetric data segment into compact multi-resolution representation. Secondly, our rendering pipeline employs an outer-core approach to render the encoded representation, delivering interactive responsiveness on commercial GPU. Our proposed representation is structured on top of the multi-resolution, where the entire volume is partitioned into data segments, or it is called micro blocks with various levels of detail. So during the rendering phase, only those visible micro blocks to the current user's point of view are loaded to the fast memory for rendering. As user explores the dataset, such data loading can also be accelerated by introducing caching and prefetching. So macro blocks with various levels of detail needs to be encoded into functional approximation models. We call this model macro model. So encoding single macro blocks is to conduct an exhaustive search to find the suitable number of control points for a required error bound. So the total time complexity of encoding all macro blocks with various levels of detail is given at the bottom. As you can see, encoding a very large-scale dataset into macro blocks with various level of detail is almost impractical in time. So the proposed adaptive FAM can actually decrease the time complexity of such encoding. It involves iterations of in-level and cross-level adaptive encoding from the lowest level of detail to the highest level of detail. In-level adaptive encoding is basically the exhaustive search for the suitable number of control points, while the cross-level encoding is reusing the in-level encoding results from the previous level of detail to minimize the in-level encoding needed for the current level of detail. So this figure shows the adaptive FAM encoding results on a real scientific dataset. The first row shows the regions that need the in-level encoding for each level of detail. So we can see that only a portion of the entire dataset requires such expensive operation. Adaptive FAM actually minimizes the need of expensive in-level encoding and also minimize the total macro model size, which while still maintain certain level of accuracy. So for this flame dataset, using our method can improve the encoding time about 8 times, and our resulting macro model are about 35 times smaller in size compared to the original input data. Second, we also propose a rendering framework that takes the macro model encoded by adaptive FAM to generate the rendering results. Our framework includes 3 procedures, which are caching, rendering, and prefetching. So for evaluation, we use a March-kernel lob synthetic 3D function as the ground truth to evaluate the rendering quality. For performance evaluation, we use 5 large-scale real dataset to assess the practical performance of the pipeline. So we compare the quality and the performance metric among several multi-resolution solutions, which are the first, the downsampling, which is the traditional way of doing multi-resolution. Second, the FAM, which is the functional approximation-based multi-resolution, where the encoding parameter is fixed for every level of detail. Third is our proposed adaptive FAM, where the encoding parameter optimized by jointly considering the level of detail and the data itself. So let's start to look at some results. So for the encoding time results, our adaptive methods can improve the encoding time compared with the default functional approximation methods. And we can also see that our encoding time is also data dependent. The adaptive FAM representation is also a compressed version of the original macro blocks, which is actually beneficial to the I/O intensive auto-core caching operations. So this is very important because this is one of the main contribution to the overall input latency. And then we also compare the result, the rendering quantity of recasting for any given sample distance. The methods using functional approximation always give the higher rendering accuracy than the downsampling. It is also worth noticing that the adaptive FAM, although using much smaller macro models in size than the FAM, it has a very close rendering accuracy to the FAM. So we also compare the rendering quality between adaptive FAM and other popular volumetric compressors, including ZFP, SD3, and the T-Thrash. So we can see that our method gives the best rendering accuracy when the compression ratio is less than around 30. Our method is more suitable for time-sensitive application because it doesn't need this decompression process as other compressors do. For performance evaluation, we first evaluate the input latency without prefetching. So our method achieves a much smaller caching time than the FAM. On the other hand, since the macro model in our methods representation involves less average number of control points, its rendering time is also faster than FAM. So now let's compare the performance with the prefetching. Compare with the performance without prefetching as shown in the previous slides. We can see that using prefetching as shown here, which is the APPA, can improve the caching time for all testing dataset. So this is because this is achieved by the decreased caching miss rate through the prefetching as shown in the right figure. So we observe similar results when using other popular prefetching algorithms. So we also compare our input latency of the proposed method with the already fast multi-resolution framework through downsampling, utilizing GPU 3D texture for fast trilinear interpolation. Our method is the fastest method for all the testing datasets, except for the flip dataset. For caching time, our method is always the fastest. So downsampling is not performing well when handling large-scale dataset for two main reasons. First, the caching time becomes the main bottleneck when the number of microblocks becomes much larger. And secondly, the query using GPU accelerated 3D texture is already fast, but it scales linearly with respect to the microblocks size. So on the other hand, our methods can minimize the caching time through a compact resolution, and also our relationship with the size of the data is a sublinear. So that means our method performs better when visualizing large-scale volumetric dataset. So in conclusion, we propose this adaptive encoding method to efficiently encode a large amount of data into a functional approximation model. And then we also provide a renderer to take advantage of this representation to render high quality results with improved input latency. So please check our GitHub repo if you're interested in our work. And here come to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions from the audience.